Before we start, I would like to quickly show you one document what was declassified and made public in 2007. Under the entry, Prologue Research and Publishing Company. I leave the content for your own analysis. Prologue Research Organization, which was in fact a branch of the CIA, opened Pandora's box of the Orange Revolution and the resurrection of the nationalist movement, which in the light of the international law promote prohibited symbols from the war and glorify war criminals. Could it be that the Ukrainian nation, which has lived in peace for hundreds of years between its neighbors, Slavic brothers, has not become a victim of manipulation by the West, which used ideology for its own purposes? Here we have a name, Mykola Lebed, a member of this organization, a close collaborator of CIA accused in the 1930s of murdering Bronisław Pieracki, the Polish Minister of International Affairs. The third and important links contains already public files regarding the cooperation of members of UON-UPA, nationalist groups, and the so-called SS Gallizien. Do Poles deserve to have history distorted by Kremlin? Is in Washington and London, which hides and silences the fact, becoming a false friends? And can Kiev whitewash our common history as it sees fit?
After World War II, communism became the bugaboo, and the Soviet Union became the enemy. And one of the things the CIA did right after World War II was hire a lot of Nazis. Guys who'd been Nazis were now recycled and brought into the CIA. The Nazi rocket scientist, von Braun, went to work for the United States developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the Nazi past was forgiven, and Nazis went to work for the United States, including a guy named Reinhard Gehlen, who'd been the Nazi military intelligence officer in charge of operations against the Soviets in Eastern Europe. And this guy Gehlen became the head of the CIA's main intelligence operator into East Berlin and areas like the Ukraine, where the Nazis had intelligence agents during World War II. And this guy Reinhard Gehlen, on behalf of his new CIA masters, just activated all the agent nets that he had during World War II. The same thing was going on in Ukraine, although the Ukraine had very much large swaths of its population were fascists and were actively involved against the war against the Soviets and were enemies of the United States in World War II. After World War II, they became assets of the CIA. So the CIA has been developing fascist assets in the Ukraine for 70 years. And every year, since 1948, when the CIA went into operation, it has had a station in the Ukraine with a CIA officer who's running operations. And those operations have all been directed against first the Soviet Union, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, against Russia. There's a lot of momentum that has built up over 75 years. Vast agent nets have been put in place. Sleeper agents have been in place for decades, and they're all working against Russia, which is why nowadays it's so hard for the mainstream media and the government to shift and even consider for a moment having good relations with Russia. NATO, its whole mandate and its whole reason for its existence has been to threaten and roll back Russia and eventually sabotage and subvert it and put it out of business. And Ukraine the CIA's operations in the Ukraine are the cutting-edge vanguard of this effort. So if you look at recent events in Ukraine, you have to see them in that context. How, for decades, the CIA has been trying to recruit Ukrainian politicians, Ukrainian businessmen who are sympathetic and compatible with Western American ideas and values and interests of fighting against the Russians, and recruiting them and putting them in place, and setting them up with bank accounts, giving them paramilitary training, everything the CIA does across the board. Ukraine has been the vanguard of this operation against Russia. The details are in my book. The CIA's organized crime, how this works at the agent level, how the CIA would go around and work with after the coup that threw out a pro-Russian government and installed a pro-American anti-Russian government, how the CIA already had security services and military people in place who were able to create private militias that would then work against individuals in the Ukraine who were pro-Russian, how they, just like treating it like South Vietnam or any other country that the United States occupies. And that is the situation in the Ukraine. The United States occupies Ukraine. Its government is an occupation government that's supported and funded and directed by the United States. And the businessmen and the military people and the politicians that support the Americans benefit, and those who don't are put on hit lists and they're targeted. And that's basically the history and the summary of what's going on in the Ukraine. And the CIA, through its agent operations, which have been in place for 70 years, is at the vanguard of that operation.
So is the intent and purpose of the CIA and American involvement in Ukraine to topple Russia, to Balkanize Russia?
Oh, absolutely, but also to steal Ukraine's, to take all the natural resources that are available there, the profits that can be had. I mean, it's capitalism. It's nationalism, American nationalists, businessmen. I mean, as soon as the CIA arranged that coup and installed a pro-American government, Joe Biden's son became the head of one of the biggest oil companies, I think it was, in the Ukraine. American businessmen just swooped down like vultures to take over all the, any business that could, like mafia dons and mafia, gangsters that they could steal everything from. And that's exactly what they're doing. And especially in eastern Ukraine, where a lot of the natural resource industries are based, that's why it's so contentious there. The CIA, through its assets in private industry, is trying to bring all those people who are considered compatible into the American fold. You don't see it at its dirty level, the level of blackmailing people, the level of extorting people, the level of the CIA using its underworld contacts to squeeze these people and to force them out of business and to make life miserable for them so that they give up their associations with Russians and Russian businessmen. But that's what's going on at the very basic level. I mean, militias are being formed to terrorize anybody who's supporting Russia, and like in Donbass and places like that. So the details, again, which you would have to spend years studying to understand, I suggest you just read the books to see how the CIA has relationships with the security services in the Ukraine. And as soon as the coup was launched, it took over control of those security services, and it started drawing up the hit lists of targeting people that it could go after. And the reason it's targeting the people that targets most highly are the people that are sitting on natural resources that American businessmen want. It's not going after, plumbers and carpenters. It's going after major businessmen. And that's what the CIA does. It paves the way for American business interests by using illegal methods, and by using illegal methods to install politicians in the Ukraine that will follow the American line. Everything that you don't know about that is going on, and that you're not told about by the media, which I should add is well aware of what's going on, but just doesn't tell you, because it's good for their business too.
And today we have people like Chrystia Freeland, senior Ukrainian government official. She's a Nazi, 100% Nazi.
If used in these illegal blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. Send your semi-trailers home. The Canadian economy needs them to be doing legitimate work, not to be illegally making us all poorer.
United States, we've allowed Victoria Nuland. She's a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. I'm an American. I believe in democracy. No, you support Stepan Bandera and the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. You believe in Ukrainian nationalism, and you're supporting Ukrainian nationalists today. Ukrainian nationalism, Ukrainian nationalist is just a euphemism for Nazi.
Because it's Polish-speaking government, and if you go deeper, I told you, into the family tree, you find some very interesting connections there. That's why. So here is a question that maybe will be strange, but I don't really think that Nazis lost the World War II. I think they were relocated, Argentina and other places, and then they took under different identity, and they went on to create new families, and then from those families they put certain people into positions that are now running very, very important strategic positions in the decision making. Do you think that Nazis will ever be completely removed from this planet, Scott?
I mean, the thing about Nazis is there's a physical aspect to it, and you've described it, and then there's the ideological aspect of it. One of the big problems at the end of the Second World War was that we being the West, almost immediately turned it from being an anti-Nazi struggle into an anti-Soviet struggle. And in doing so, we made it possible that the people we were formerly fighting against are now being seen as potential allies, because our new enemy, the Soviet Union, was the enemy of these people. And so this allowed us to go through various mental gymnastics, where we could take a General Galen, for instance, who ran Nazi intelligence on the East Front, and allow him to become part of a new German intelligence organization, or to create a new German intelligence organization subordinated to the United States. They were there. Tens of thousands remained behind, controlled by the Nazis, working for the Nazis, for the benefit of the Nazis, who then that got assumed by the Germans and assumed by the CIA. So now they're working for the CIA to do their nefarious tasks. So already we have Nazis on the ground working for the CIA. We have Nazis fleeing to about 120,000 Ukrainian nationalists, supporters of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, fled with Nazi Germany as they retreated out of Ukraine, went back into Germany, and many of them were not turned over. Most of them, none of them were turned over to the Soviets after the war. The 14th SS Division, the Gallizien Division, surrendered en masse to the Germans, or to the British, and the British pretty much pardoned them all and sent them to England and sent them to Canada. Sent Nazis, honest to God Nazis, SS members, to Canada, to England. Others dispersed. There was a whole wave of them that came to the United States. I keep talking about it, 60 miles down the road, Ellenville, New York. There's an Organization for Ukrainian Nationalists summer camp where they indoctrinate children every year. They just ran a camp through there. They have heroes monuments. Slava Ukraina, glory to the hero, symbol of Ukraine, flanked by 4 statues, Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich on one side. They're the greatest mass murderers in modern history, right there, glorified as heroes for these Ukrainian Nazis who live in America and perpetuate Nazi ideology. They just took a photograph of the summer camp this summer, dated June, where they had the kids wearing their brown Nazi uniforms, holding up portraits of Stepan Bandera and banners with Nazi symbology on it. It's insane what's going on. So they reside here, they reside in Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and Germany. They're everywhere. So even if Russia were to eradicate all of the, right sector, Sloboda Party, Azov battalion members, killed them all in Ukraine, the cancer still exists overseas, paid for and funded and supported by. And as these people grow up, not only in Ukraine, I think I've talked about this before, about 200,000 Banderas were captured by the Soviets at the end of when they finally crushed the resistance, and they were imprisoned in the Gulag. But in 1956, Nikita Khrushchev did his de-Stalinization, had his secret speech and basically started condemning Stalin and, trying to turn a fresh page. And so he opened up the doors of the gulags and released these political prisoners. Now, some of them were political prisoners, but many of them were mass murderers. The people that participated, facilitated, condoned, collaborated with Ukrainians who slaughtered Jews, who slaughtered. When I say slaughtered, people need to really do their research. There's some just photographs that you have to look at, as the Ukrainian pointing the rifle at the mother holding her child, ready to knock her brains out, put her into a ditch. That's what they do. Okay, that's what they did. These are heartless scum. And they were put in the Gulag. They were released from the Gulag. And then they were allowed back into society, where they worked their way up through the Ukrainian ranks, intimidating people, that's what the organization Ukrainian Nationalists do. The knock at the door, if you don't support us, we'll kill you, you'll kill your wife, kill your children, kind of thing. That happened throughout Soviet times as they threatened themselves and cajoled themselves and reformed their secret bands to work their way back up into Ukrainian politics in the Soviet Union. So, and this is all being done, funded by the CIA, using the diaspora. So the diaspora retains contact with these Ukrainians. It's done in the guise of, cultural exchanges or, whatever they want to call it. The CIA is funneling money. The CIA funneled money to these people up until 1990. After that, that money got taken over by other sources of income that were not directly tied to the CIA, but still were serving the cause of promoting this ideology as a way of undermining the Soviet Union. It's they lost. I'll tell you this, they lost, but they didn't die, and they're being reborn. And today we have people like Chrystia Freeland, senior Ukrainian government official. She's a Nazi, 100% Nazi. She lies about her grandfather's past as a Nazi propagandist. She was raised in the scouting system, which is a pro-Bandera scouting system. She's been indoctrinated in totality, and her policies and the policies of the Canadian government reflect that. The cancer exists in America, it exists in Canada, it exists elsewhere. Anybody that allows a Ukrainian diaspora that is clearly linked to the ideology of Stepan Bandera and the organization Ukrainian Nationalists to exist and produce people who are then brought up through the system to attain positions of high governmental authority.
We turn now to the revelation that the Ukrainian World War II veteran honored last week in the Canadian House of Commons was actually a Nazi, setting off a diplomatic crisis. Last Friday, Canada's House of Commons gave a standing ovation to a Canadian-Ukrainian veteran who fought in a Nazi SS unit during World War II. 98-year-old Yaroslav Hunka was honored during a visit by the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, who also applauded him.
Here in the chamber today, Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
That's the Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, who invited Jaroslav Hunta. Rota resigned from his post Tuesday.
There it is.
Yeah, it's a memorial.
Who are you?
Hi, my name is John Paul Himka. I'm an emeritus professor from the University of Alberta here, and I'm a specialist in Ukrainian history.
I'm not very familiar with this monument. If you had to succinctly say what it represents.
Those who struggled for the freedom of Ukraine.
Oh, so specifically freedom fighters for Ukraine.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The Борцям за волю України is to the fighters for the freedom of Ukraine.
It's a monument to Ukrainian veterans. Okay. It's got 7 groups in there that fought with the Ukrainian army. Okay. And 2 of them happen to be associated with the Waffen-SS. Well, that's part of the Nazis.
Whoa, yeah, I know that's part of the Nazis, yeah. Like, are you serious?
Hi, so this is Per Rudling. He's in Sweden right now, and he's a historian and associate professor that he can hopefully answer some of our questions. So just for, obviously we're talking about that World War II monument, and just for some background information, we were wondering when it was built.
That one appeared in 1976, and it was erected by members of the Ukrainian community, primarily by the Ukrainian War Veterans Association.
So consecrated is when it's blessed. Do you know who had attended that consecration?
Oh, many people in the community would have, but the person who consecrated it was the head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, Metropolitan or Patriarch Yosef Slipy.
The purpose was to sort of like share multicultural funding for the purpose of building up and supporting Ukrainian culture. The logic was to sort of by stimulating, by being solidarical, open and tolerant of minority cultural expression, you will stimulate democracy and vitality in the Canadian society. So there's a paradox inherent in this, right? That Canadian multicultural funding goes to build monuments to people that are not necessarily your typical mainstream liberals.
I'm sure if like whoever fought for it or fought with whoever must have done it with some specific purpose. They felt it right thing to do. I mean, it's a monument that praises for people giving their lives for a purpose.
University of Alberta might be one of 2 universities, to my knowledge, that had a Waffen-SS veteran as university chancellor. In the cases when this was brought up for discussion, well, I have to say that there was a little reaction other than a sort of defensive, aggressive one from parts of the community and from members of that generation. I tried to raise this issue in about 10 years ago. It should have been raised earlier. Had it not been raised by John Paul Himka, for instance, 10 years ago, who met significant resistance from the community, by the way, had he not raised this issue, you would imagine what sort of like what the goal, what the score for Putin's propagandists would be, this festering, unprocessed history of the Canadian prairie.
Over there in Ukraine now, they're making heroes out of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and of UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. They so far haven't rehabilitated Waffen-SS division, but there's lots of noise in that direction.
My thought process is how many tax dollars did it take to erect it, and how much is it going to take to tear it down?
I think the larger issue here is that taxpayers' money has gone into underwriting and stimulating a political culture, funding political groups which are ultimately not in line with the sort of intentions of, as far as I can tell, of the multicultural policies that Canadians had in mind when they introduced this, or reckoning honestly with history. And this monument right now is not presenting history in a very honest way. It's actually enshrining a selective version of history, which I think is not in line with the Canadian values.
If they want to build a monument on their own private land, that's probably okay, right?
I think it should be up to the people of Edmonton to determine what sort of memorials they should have in their cities.
There's some brilliant monuments out there. and they make you think. And they make you think and they make you consider like large questions. This is simple. These people fought for our freedom. They're heroes.
Apologetics of the Cold War period. So they've colored the narration of the past, and I think that's sort of like the what's important here. And in many ways, Ukrainian studies, as we know it in the West, I mean, it's I have to say, I mean, it's a subjective notion. It's been rather dysfunctional. It has been very reluctant to deal with these topics. There has been very little interest in the Holocaust, but a very strong focus on what they call the Holodomor. Holodomor is a term they used to call it the Ukrainian genocide up until 1984 in connection with the Demyanjuk procedure and the establishment of OSI, the Office of Special Investigation and whatnot. The Holocaust miniseries that in which that brought for the first time the Holocaust into the living room with NBC into American and Western German and Canadian and Swedish living rooms, right? The Holocaust miniseries 1978 made this a part of social culture, and there, of course, Ukrainians and Lithuanians figure in a less than flattering way, and it stung the diaspora, and therefore, you know, the Holocaust was a very problematic issue that they couldn't just avoid it because it was so central now in history. So they start to talk about Holodomor, the famine of 1932-33, which they called Holo, but they, as a rule, attached the number 7 million to it, which was symbolically very important. This was, of course, the historicity of this is not in doubt. The Soviet Union recognized in 1987, and this was Stalin's greatest crime against his own people, and it was between 2.6 and 3.9 million people died in Ukrainian SSR alone. So no doubt about this, but the discursive direction there is to talk about Ukrainians as victims of crimes committed by others, by Nazis, by communists, by Poles,